The game we have here is Raptor, Call of the Shadows, developed by Cygnus Studios and published by Apogee in 1994. It's a side-scrolling shoot-'em-up similar to the console and arcade games of the 80s and 90s, but it's a game developed specifically for the PC market. You're a mercenary hired by the MegaCorp to eliminate the competition. That's it. That's the entire premise of the game. Now throw it out the window because it's irrelevant. The real story is, you blow stuff up and stay alive. That's the game in a nutshell. It's played from a top-down perspective at a fixed scrolling rate. You take down the enemies and earn some money. The enemies have differing movement and attack patterns. Some will move straight ahead and fire their weapon, some will move left or right or in a pattern, and some will fire diagonally or aim directly at you. They also have different weapons, slow-moving bullets, missiles, faster bullets, and beam weapons. You also encounter ground forces, tanks, boats, or turrets. You need anti-ground weapons to deal with them effectively. In between missions, you have access to the shop. From here, you can repair your aircraft, buy shields, bombs, and weapons. You can possess more than one of each weapon by picking them up during a mission, but they don't actually do anything beyond the first weapon, so you can't stock up on extra air-to-air missiles and unload a barrage of them. You just sell them off for some extra cash. You technically have regenerating health on every difficulty except Elite. The way it works is, you stop firing and you regenerate 1 point of health every 5 seconds or so. It's negligible at best, and in all cases, you might as well just continue firing and take out the ship that's about to appear on screen. I'd say it's a pointless feature. Playing with the mouse feels very slippery. It's easy to overshoot the movement, and I always end up running into missiles even when I try to move in a different direction. Using a controller doesn't seem that great either. The dead zone, assuming there is one to begin with, doesn't seem large enough, so you end up moving without actually touching the controls. The best way to play it is with a keyboard, and it's a real shame too because a controller works really well with these types of games. You have 4 difficulty modes, but the selection seems a little weird to me. Going from normal to veteran is very steep. I found a normal difficulty to be a bit too easy, but step up the difficulty and it becomes way too hard. And there's a reason for this. When you beat the game, you keep all your stuff and start from the beginning. It's effectively a New Game Plus mode, but they moved the difficulty up by 1. So you're not actually supposed to start on Veteran because it's impossible without your extra weapons. You can also begin the game with any sector, but again, the later sectors are impossible without purchasing the stronger weapons. You have this illusion of choice when, in reality, you don't have a choice. You start from the Bravo sector at the normal difficulty. The bosses don't feel unique in any way. They can be a massive ship or an immobile structure on the ground. In all cases, they behave the same and fire the same projectiles that every other enemy has. Watch the pattern, evade the barrage of weapon fire, and do some damage until they die. The later levels do have them as mini-bosses, but they go down quick once you have the twin laser, the most powerful weapon in the game. 3 seconds, maybe even less, and they're gone. And despite there being 16 weapons, there's not a whole lot to differentiate between them. With the exception of the 2 turrets, they all fire straight forward. There are no spread guns or side-firing weapons. Not a whole lot of weapon switching is needed. You can go through the Bravo sector with missiles, Tango sector with the laser turret, and the outer regions with the twin laser. The other weapons just seem like filler content. I just feel there are some things missing from the game that other shoot-'em-ups have. Very basic things like a score screen at the end of a level. How many enemies did I kill? How much money did I earn? There's no way to gauge how well you performed on a level, and that's on top of the overly simplified gameplay here. The game was released in 1994, and when you put them side by side with its console brethren of the time, I'd say the graphics have a disadvantage. It doesn't have the flashy explosions or colorful UI that the other shoot-'em-ups have, and some of the levels and enemies just look very bland and static. A lot of reviews back then praised it for its stunning graphics, but I can't agree with this sentiment. The enemies are just sliding across the screen and have minimal animation, if any. Only the player has a respectable amount of animation, moving left or right and firing weapons. At the very least, it has a higher resolution with VGA color, and it maintains its frame rate and speed throughout the game. As for the audio, the reverse is true. The sound effects are just awesome! You don't have the squeaks and hisses of the console games. You have explosions, and gunfire, and lasers! The reviews back then praised the sound as well, and I do agree with them here. The music sounds just okay. It has a generic action game melody to it, and it does the job, but there's no high energy tracks to really get the adrenaline going. There were several ports of the game, though it's mainly for compatibility for different platforms, and they don't really change anything. In 1999, Cygnus Studios, now known as Mountain King Studios, re-released the game to run natively in Windows. This version offered slightly improved graphics and audio and force feedback controller support, but it also introduced its own set of problems with the controls. When using the keyboard, your move speed is cut in half, and this artificially inflates the difficulty. If you use the mouse controls, you're unable to move to the rightmost side of the screen. The 2010 edition by DotEmu is effectively the same as the Windows version, with the graphical improvements and none of the problems. There were no modern updates to the game itself, like modern graphics or improved playability, but there are resolution options as well as filtering, and the music was converted to WAV format. It's mainly a compatibility port, so you can run the game on the latest version of Windows. The shareware version was included with a copy of practically every Apogee game after 1994. You most likely played this at one point or another, either browsing a bulletin board system or shareware website for some new games, or you went through the extras included with an Apogee game, most likely Duke Nukem 3D or Shadow Warrior. This shows off how powerful the shareware model was in the 90s. You may not have bought the full version, but you probably played the shareware version and told someone about it. The game also has a few Easter eggs. For example, on the sector selection screen, if you turn on all 3 switches, you get some interesting enemies like monkeys that throw coconuts at you, and cows with missile launchers and lasers. Alternatively, you can set the date on your PC's internal clock to that of a developer's birthday, such as March 12 for Bobby Prince. But despite the Easter eggs and all the cool sound effects in the game, Raptor feels very basic and repetitive. It had many avenues of exposure through its shareware distribution, but the game ultimately suffered from offering nothing new to the genre or standing out in any way. All the enemies and bosses function the same way, the levels are essentially the same with differing scrolling backgrounds, and the weapons feel like they're there for the sake of claiming the game has lots of weapons. Even their cheat codes are simplistic. To give yourself health and a death ray, you press backspace. No key combinations, no menu options, backspace. There's nothing memorable about this game, except perhaps this is a game you grew up with and you have that attachment to it. Fair enough, but if you introduce this game to someone who has never played this before, they probably won't enjoy it. At the very least, I hope you enjoyed this video.